Picture this. You're sitting alone and suddenly a voice cuts through the silence. It knows your deepest fears, your hidden shame, and it won't shut up. It's not a friend. It's not your conscience. It's something else taunting you day after day. For millions of people with schizophrenia, this isn't a thought experiment. It's their reality. But here's the kicker. What if those voices aren't just a glitch in your brain? What if there's something more? So, today we're diving into a question that might just flip everything you know upside down. Could schizophrenia have a supernatural side? Let's find out together. We'll see you on the inside.
No.
You are now entering the realm of the freaky deaky. An unsuspecting stop at the crossroads of fantasy and reality, where the frayed edges of make-believe seep into this cookie-cutter white picket world you've been led to believe is far from extraordinary. What you're about to hear are true stories.
Alleged true stories.
Christian, just... okay? Tales of the strange and inexplicable thought only to exist in film and folklore. Although difficult to accept, we do not know everything about this reality. About time or space, what lies beneath the ocean's depths. And try though we might, the unchanging truth remains. There are some things we legitimately cannot explain logically.
And now that we're on the inside,
No again.
I've cut that out twice. Christian, you can keep at it until you learn how to edit a podcast. I'm the puppet master.
I do know how to edit a podcast, just not as well as you.
Okay, when you learn how to edit a podcast well, or not too well if you ask certain listeners.
To take out a no, you don't even have to edit it well.
I just have to cut it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will. And I did, actually. Turns out people are like, what no? It's fine. Folks, before we get into this week's episode, I would like to let you know that if you are someone that complains a lot, if you are someone that is constantly badgering via comment or review, you don't actually have to listen to this episode. This is an episode that is not for you. This is an episode for people that are kind of, I don't know, interested in the topic. Like, oh, perhaps this is something. I'm not here to step on anyone's feet or say this is definitively what I believe 100%. I'm just here to provide a perspective on a different angle to schizophrenia. And this is something that I've actually seen a handful of times recently over the past year.
What kind of people?
No, I've seen episodes on this subject, which is so weird. I should have done it when I first thought about it a year ago. All I'm saying is if you're someone that is triggered easily and maybe you don't like to open your mind, I said it.
Or like you agree with science.
Well, there's plenty of science in this, Christian. That's the beautiful thing is the people that we're covering today, scientists.
Mm-hmm.
Aha.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, see, you pick and choose. You cherry pick your science, dude.
I do not.
It looks like it sounds like you do.
Just some people that call themselves scientists aren't scientists.
Okay, but if people go to school for that type of stuff, are they scientists? And then if they steer out of what normal science says is, oh, this is rational science, you can't do anything else, then they're like, okay, they're not scientists anymore, you know?
Sometimes they aren't. Sometimes people, like the people we see a lot are...
Christian, maybe you shouldn't be in this episode. Maybe you should sit this one out.
You're being kind of weird.
Okay, fair warning. Way overstimulated today. All right, way stressed out today. And I even thought about it. I was like, is this the best day to do this episode? And I said, you know what? You don't care, remember? And I said, you know what, me? You're right.
You know, I could have given you a hug before we started.
No, I got hugs. It's fine. No, my son wouldn't shut the hell up. Everyone in the restaurant, like talking at the exact same time. Can't deal with that. I can't hear anything. The adults are trying to talk, and there's 15 kids. Dogs are brown. I have a mailbox too. And you're like, shut the fuck up.
I'm going to quietly show you a new way of parenting.
I can't do that. And I thought about doing that to like level out before the episode, but I can't because this is such an important episode to me that I've built it up for so long that I'm like, well, I got to do it.
No, I wasn't talking about the episode, man.
No, I know. I know what you were talking about.
It just takes the edge off of all that unneeded stress that life gives you. Strawberry. Yeah.
I do. Suddenly everything's strawberry daydreams.
Oh. Remind me next episode. I have a story to tell from the store, but I don't think it fits into this one, but it's about Creed. So if you guys want to hear something about Creed next week.
Wow, we literally never hear anything about Creed.
Cool. Yeah. So First time ever.
Anyway, guys, and if you're skipping this episode, I don't know why you're still listening. That'd be weird. But we are doing a palate cleanser as per usual after weird episodes with a listener story episode. So next week, listener stories. But let's get into this episode because there's a lot of ground to cover. Okay. So a little breakdown. We are covering a couple of books. as well as Scripture. Actually, I was right. There's Scripture. But just to balance it out for all the naysayers and Christian haters out there, I'm covering religions from across the world that have similar things to say about this. Okay, so it's not just Christianity.
They're all, it's
nobody
all the
needs
same
your
God.
blasphemy, all
It's
right?
all the same God.
There's only one God, and it's fine. We're also tackling firsthand accounts from people that have experienced this type of phenomenon, as well as touching on an article from a shaman. And I even, a couple days ago after I put this episode together, I even came across a TED Talk of someone talking about this exact same thing. How wild is that? Kismet.
It's not very wild.
For a TED Talk, man, come on.
I see a lot of TED Talks.
There are some weird TED Talks, I'll give you that. But this one is actually pretty fascinating. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the link to that in the Facebook group when we get to it. So this is a reminder for Editor Scott to copy that link. And then when the episode comes out, post it in the Facebook group.
For what are you posting in the Facebook group only?
The TED Talk. Because I didn't add any of that information into this because it was like months after I finished writing this episode. So that's kind of what we're touching on. And first, let's ground ourselves. Schizophrenia, it's a word you've probably heard, I imagine. It's a mental health condition marked by hallucinations, delusions, and thoughts that feel like a scrambled radio station. Science tells us it's about dopamine, messed up neurotransmitters, a brain gone haywire. Doctors prescribe meds, and that's that. But not everyone buys it.
That's not that.
Okay, would you like to give a...
No, I want you to go.
Are you sure? Are you sure you don't want to give all your thoughts on schizophrenia before I get going? Because it sounds like you got a lot of information in your head there, man.
No, I just don't want to just move on.
I gave the people that want an out an option to get out. So you don't have to worry about like me stepping on people's toes. If they're listening now,
I will try to
they're masochists.
Hold my crap till the end.
And they're gluttons for punishment, all right? That's on them.
But if I slip up and there's a little comment in there, you would do the same to me.
Would I?
Sometimes.
Or would mine be funny, Christian?
I mean,
did you think of that?
Obviously, some of mine are funny.
Doctors prescribe meds, and that's that, but not everyone buys it. Two thinkers we'll meet today, Wilson Van Dusen and Jerry Marzinsky. They've looked at schizophrenia and said, hold on just a second, there's something else going on here. And it starts with the voices. Wilson Van Dusen was a clinical psychologist. He wasn't just there to nod and scribble notes. He listened, really listened, to what people were experiencing. One story stuck with him. Imagine a woman, let's call her Sarah. She'd sit across from him, eyes darting, and say, it's there again, Doc, telling me I'm trash, that I should just give up. Van Dusen didn't hear a jumble of nonsense. He heard something with personality, something mean, something that seemed to want to grind her down. He wrote about this in his book, The Presence of Other Worlds, and here's the wild part. Sarah wasn't alone. Patient after patient described voices that weren't random. They had intent, like a bully who wouldn't quit. Now, if you're thinking, okay, that's creepy, but it's still just her brain, right?
Yes.
Okay, got it in there. Van Dusen started noticing patterns. These voices didn't act like the chaotic misfires psychiatry talks about. They were consistent, cunning, almost like they were alive. And that got him wondering, what if this isn't just biology? What if it's something we can't see under a microscope? Sarah's story wasn't some one-off. It echoed ideas from a guy who lived centuries before her, a man who claimed he could peek behind the curtain of reality. His name was Emanuel Swedenborg. Hell of a name. Have you heard of that guy?
From
Swedish?
Scandinavia?
He sounds like he might be, yeah. And he's our next stop. Let's step back, way back, to the 1700s. Swedenborg started out as a rock star in the science world. Think engineering, anatomy, even early neuroscience. The guy was a genius, but around his mid-50s, something shifted. He started having visions. Vivid, wild experiences where he said he talked to angels, spirits, and even peeked into the afterlife. He wrote it all down, thousands of pages, and it's the backbone of Wilson Van Dusen's book, The Presence of Other Worlds. Swedenborg claimed there's more to reality than what we see. There's a spiritual dimension full of beings that can cross into our minds. Here's where it gets juicy. Swedenborg said these spirits aren't just floating around, they interact with us. Good ones lift you up, but the bad ones, they're trouble. He called them lower order spirits, and they love messing with people, whispering doubts, stirring up chaos. Sound familiar?
Sounds like he was a Christian.
That sounds like my day-to-day life, to be honest with you, but that's for a different psychologist, no doubt. Anyway, sound familiar? It did to Van Dusen. As a psychologist, he was knee-deep in the world of schizophrenia, and he started connecting dots. He'd ask his patients, what do the voices say? One guy told him, it's like something evil's on my shoulder, always hissing at me. Another said, It knows things I never told anyone. I don't know where you'd come from that. Like that seems crazy, but if that is also inside your head, obviously it would know things that you never told anyone because it's you. But I threw it in there anyway. Van Dusen thought, this isn't just mental noise, this matches Swedenborg's playbook. Swedenborg had this idea called Correspondences. Everything physical has a spiritual twin. Your thoughts, they're a battlefield where these spirits can step in. Van Dusen saw it in action. He'd sit with a patient, let's say a young man, jittery, hearing voices, and the guy would say, it's telling me to hurt someone. Van Dusen didn't just hear a symptom, he heard a presence, something Swedenborg warned about centuries ago. Swedenborg saw the mind as a doorway, spirits slipping through, some friendly, some not. Van Dusen took that idea and ran with it, but he wasn't the only one. Now let's jump to the gritty present with a guy who took this theory into overdrive, and that's Jerry Marzinsky, a psychotherapist.
You said that. You just really emphasized psycho.
He's a psycho.
He's a psycho and a therapist.
I know, like my brain saw a big word and I was like, okay, don't fuck it up. And so I had to like really emphasize. Apologies. He wasn't a psychotic therapist, to our knowledge. He was a psychotherapist. How do you say that without emphasizing psycho?
The way you just did.
Really?
You said it right the second time.
It sounded the same to me, but it's fine. Who spent decades in the trenches, hospitals, prisons, you name it. His book, An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, is where things get real. Marzinsky wasn't some armchair theorist. He clocked thousands of hours with schizophrenic patients, and he noticed something psychiatry didn't want to touch. The voices. Hearing them wasn't just a symptom, it was a pattern. Take a patient we'll call Tom. Marzinsky sat with him in a locked ward, and Tom said, they're telling me to cut myself. If I don't listen, they scream louder. Marzinsky leaned in and asked, who's they? Tom said, I don't know, but they hate me. Over years, Marzinsky heard this again and again and again. Voices that weren't gibberish. They lied, they pushed, they had goals. Here's where he goes off script. Mainstream psychiatry says it's all dopamine, all brain chemistry, pop a pill. But Marzinsky said, no way. He started seeing these voices as entities, spiritual parasites, if you will, feeding off pain. He leaned on Swedenborg via Van Dusen, who'd written about evil spirits harassing people. Marzinsky thought, this isn't a hallucination, it's a presence. One patient told him, it's like a shadow that talks. It wants me scared. Another said, it knows when I'm weak. These weren't random, they were tactical. Marzinsky got fed up with the system. He'd watched doctors pump patients with meds, muting the voices but not stopping them. He'd argue, listen to what they're saying. These things are consistent, negative, and alive. The ivory tower, as he calls it, brushed him off. Classic. What a great word for the system. The ivory tower.
I feel like certain things are a little too loaded to always bring rational thought to it. Like anytime you say mainstream anything,
that's hard, yeah.
It's too triggering to certain people, and they won't. They just don't think rationally sometimes when that word comes out. And the ivory tower, I don't know what the better word would be to convey the same thing. Maybe that's something not just us, but a lot of people need to look into, but also we got to realize there's a reason people use that word.
Yeah.
So we got to get past that part of it first. Another totally off subject. So let's get back to this.
I get what you're saying with mainstream. It is just hard to think of a different word for it.
Yeah. And that's just
like normal. Is it normal? No.
I think it's one of those things where you almost need to work on it when you come up with that word. You know what I mean? Because it's an easy word and it conveys a message. I'm just not always sure that it's doesn't like off-put half the people you want to understand your message.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky. You may be onto something there.
So not just for another time to deal with.
We will call it the ivory tower for now.
That one's acceptable. It's kind of this along the same lines.
Feels dramatic. Feels very dramatic.
Yeah, but sometimes you got to be dramatic to convey a message.
You may be onto something again, Christian.
Yeah.
But he kept digging, and his stories pile up. Hundreds of patients, same deal. Voices that thrive on fear, weaken with resistance. It's Swedenborg's spirits rebooted for a psych ward. Marzinsky's out there, no doubt, calling schizophrenia a spiritual attack, not just a disorder. But what if you could push back? That's where Swiney maybe, I can never, Swiney.
How many E's?
No, there's an I, that's the thing, it's Swiney. Swiney?
That's what it looks like.
I've just never heard that as a last name before.
Well, now we know how our family was viewed back in the day.
She was swine.
I was gonna go whiny, but depending on the
maybe whiny pig people. Let's make it even worse for her. It's fine.
She'd date Kermit.
Kermit the Frog here. Anyway, that's where
very good. I'm impressive.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's where Sherry Swiney comes in, Marzinsky's co-author. She's been there, heard the voices, and found a way to fight back. Sherry's story is raw. She dealt with voices herself, intrusive, nasty, telling her she was worthless. One day, she heard it say, "Stay inside, lock the door, you don't belong out there." Most would crumble, but Sherry didn't. She told Marzinsky, "I decided it was lying." She built something called the, quote, "That's a Lie" program. Maybe workshop that title. A mental trick where you call out the voice's bowl. It says, "You're nothing." You fire back, "That's a lie." And here's the kicker. It worked. The voice got quieter, weaker, like it needed her fear to survive. This ties right back to Swedenborg. He said evil spirits feed on your attention. Ignore them and they lose power. Van Dusen saw it in patients who resisted. Marzinsky saw it too. Sherry lived it. She'd stand her ground and the voices faded. It's not a cure-all, but it's a weapon. She and Marzinsky argue, if these things are real, you can outsmart them. So where does this leave us? Van Dusen bridged psychology and spirit with Swedenborg. Marzinsky threw down a gauntlet. These aren't hallucinations, they're invaders. Sherry showed you can fight. Is schizophrenia a brain glitch, a spiritual siege? Maybe both. Science says it's all biology, but these stories and the first-hand accounts shared later in this episode, they make you wonder what's really out there whispering in the dark. So do you have any comment on her That's a Lie program that she started and has seemingly worked for her?
It sounds to me like somebody that has faith, a religious faith, that we've probably heard this used maybe in some of our possession stories, where if you have a faith, if you have some kind of faith, and this doesn't have to be a Christian faith either, because it works for other faiths.
Sure.
And you have a belief, you can sometimes combat these things.
What if this woman didn't have a faith? Because there's no mention of faith or belief or any of that. It's just something where she was like, you know what? You've been saying this stuff inside my head. I'm fighting back by saying, no, you're wrong about that.
Yeah. And sometimes when you talk to yourself, you can have an effect for the positive, as opposed to how we normally talk about us and put ourselves down, or give ourselves extra stress, or just beat the crap out of ourselves. That's our normal setting in a lot of cases. This one sounds like that same kind of power, but projected outward, which if there is something there or something going on, it would work theoretically. If it's in your head, it would still work, because you're talking to yourself. You're talking to a part of yourself, like your subconscious, that you're not necessarily in control of, pretty much aren't in control of. Tangibly, I guess. I think you do control it to a certain extent by what thoughts you spend all day having. To me, it's just the power of the mind type thing. There could be something to the subconscious, something that I'm like, it's kind of a newer thought process behind those thoughts for me. If that makes any sense. If our subconscious does not exist just within our body, then there is a chance we could pick up other voices or other entities or beings. Maybe not entities. We'd have to figure out if that exists or not.
Well,
but we could see these things or feel these things or hear these things.
Yeah, I was trying to remember what he called them, because like none of these people were religious.
Were they? Or they were like, people are always like,
I'm saying like the actual researchers, like, because it was touted as I forget, like lower grade what did he call it?
Lower grade entities sounds really
where it's like sometimes good entities come in and sometimes bad ones. So pretty much you're picking up these frequencies in a world that we cannot see, but some are good, some are bad. It's not saying like it's Christian demons or it's this and that. Like it's literally just saying, hey, these people are picking up on something that's there.
What if they're picking up on all the multitude of signals and sounds and sensations, all the things that our brain normally filters out so we can function in society and in our family?
Sure.
Maybe that's what's going on, is they're not able to quite, filter those the way other people are. So it does come through as other voices. We can argue all day whether it is other voices or low grade, high grade entities.
Yeah.
We can argue forever over some of this crap, but we can't prove it one way or another yet. And a psychologist, just because they've experienced a lot of maybe psychotic or out there episodes in people or stories or experiences that people have, isn't necessarily like when I said that about them earlier, that's not science.
Yeah.
That's just recording or listening or, helping people through events. There's no way to tell where those events are coming from yet.
Now, what about in Sherry's case where, like, kind of what I originally asked, where she comes up with this theory where something in her head says, hey, you're worthless, you're a piece of garbage, you don't belong outside. And she says, no, you're lying about that.
Why shouldn't we say that?
But, like, she single-handedly, if this is a woman that has schizophrenia, right? Diagnosed schizophrenic, cured herself of schizophrenia by saying no to these voices.
Did
by
she
saying,
cure
like,
herself, or was she able to control it?
But controlling it outside of medication is wild, dude. Because the only way that this thing is quote unquote controlled is big pharma coming in, shoving a bunch of pills down your throat and saying like all better. Well, and like I said, you mute it, but you don't get rid of it. Like it's still there.
Really quickly.
Yeah.
I want to come out on the side of medication a little bit because it saves people's lives.
Yeah, no, there's no denying that. I'm just saying that there's some doctors that legitimately just pump you full of pills. You're brain dead, sitting there like just coasting through life, not even being able to feel shit.
Well,
like, what is that?
That sounds like our medical industry in the United States and in different parts of the Western world. It's when you live in a capitalist society and your medicine is run on that basis.
So you're saying it's okay that you can just be pumped full of pills?
I think it sounds very capitalist to me. And if we want to fix that, then we got to take that part of it away from.
But you're not taking any side on that. You're riding the fence and you're saying, well, it's capitalism. Like, that's not saying no.
I'm saying that is the problem. It doesn't matter how many good doctors or psychologists out there or psychiatrists trying to help their patients.
Yeah.
If there are kickbacks and benefits or just bad science on some of these things.
So would you recommend someone take the pills or try Sherry's approach?
I'd recommend
calling it out.
I would recommend that most people should
do what their doctors say.
No, they should. You should always start with yourself.
Yes.
And the medications for if you can't get that under control. Some people can, and some people it seems simple. And other people will struggle for their whole life, however long that may be. It may not be very long in these cases. They will struggle that whole time because it's not that simple. Like, sure, we can all try that. We can all ask ourselves to talk in that way to ourselves. But from living in this world, those thoughts get going and they're hard to control. Now imagine being schizophrenic and having voices and hallucinations and all that stuff involved. It's going to get overwhelming. You're going to be exhausted after a while. Yeah. And when you let yourself mentally get exhausted, especially with those repeating things in your head, whether you're schizophrenic or not, it's exhausting and it makes it really hard to combat anything or to be healthy in your conversations with yourself or whatever this lady was able to do.
Yeah, I know personally, I suffer from intrusive thoughts like no one's business, which I imagine is probably like the best possible case you could ever ask for if you're a schizophrenic. Like, oh, you have bad thoughts sometimes?
I think a lot of people have intrusive thoughts, myself included.
Do you?
Yeah.
Like negative intrusive thoughts like, hey, you should go play in traffic, or you're the worst, or why would you say that?
Yeah.
Or everyone behind you that's talking, they're talking about you. They're making fun of you. You have that stuff?
I've had the same stuff. It's just...
You don't strike me as the type, Christian. I got to be honest.
I think some of it is just my personality is super mellow. So I think it's
true.
And I've spent through the years a lot of time in my head. And maybe I think I've just got to a point where most of those thoughts I don't believe anymore. So I know what's going on.
You did the Sherry method.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well...
Yeah. But I think that's why I think that like a good example of using that method would be with your son when he has like a scary dream or something. If he gets the power to control that, like just tell it to stop. You want to sleep, and it works for him.
Oh, I've already told him. I was like, yeah, tell him, mom and dad said to go away. Yeah. And if that doesn't work, then come get me and I'll make it go away.
Yeah.
Right?
And that gives them, and this is something that hasn't always been a part of our past, but we should have a little bit of power over some of these things. You know, it doesn't work all the time. It doesn't work in real life. Sometimes it's like
depends on who you ask, though.
There's like positive thinking is a good example. Big,
whatever that is.
Especially it was in the 90s. It was a big thing. Think positive. Think positive. There's no weeds growing in my yard, but the weeds take over.
Yeah.
I think that's what
that is my yard now.
Hey. It is hard to take care of your yard and take care.
No, I was thinking positive. The weeds are my yard now.
Oh, okay. They're not quite that bad yet, but after this today, they might be because of the wetness. But either way, you made me lose my train of thought. But like, the positive thinking craze that went on, I think in the 90s, maybe early 2000s.
Yeah. Well, if it was 90s,
ridiculous.
It didn't work on me. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't work on anybody. You know, it's
like dare.
You can't, it's like, no matter what, deep within yourself, you know when you're lying to yourself. That's why when you, like intrusive thoughts or the negative self-talk is kind of your system. Like imagine if your brain was a computer feeding in information that is not correct, and your brain computer is like, what the fuck's going on? And it has to repurpose everything and use energy to figure out if this is true or not. And it'll beat you down. And
it's
we've
literal poison to you as a person. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in my case, I'm lucky. Like I said, I've had those thoughts throughout my life, different times, not really now, because now if something like that comes up, I'm like, whatever, man.
Yeah. You manage it a lot better.
Yeah. But some of it's practice. And when we're just talking about shit and I'm like, chill out a little bit, or, you know, I don't expect you to take my persona on, because that's kind of the opposite.
Honestly, I wish I could. But it seems fantastic.
Just little small things you can. You know, that's all. And that's all we can all do.
Yeah.
You know, I'm lucky in some ways I can do that. In other ways I can't.
Yeah.
And I think self-talk, if we did it differently, if we do it in a way that maybe parents are raising their kids now, in a lot of cases,
we'll see.
I think it'll have benefits in the long run. But it is fascinating that the psychologist goes down a path that I think is kind of kooky in a way for a psychologist to go through.
But doesn't it kind of also make sense? Like that you can, like for me personally, if I'm doing something my whole life, you get kind of bored with it. You're like, what else can I do? Like, just branch out. Like, I'm going to look into this. This sounds crazy. And then like you stumble down this rabbit hole and you're like, holy crap, I think I might be onto something.
I don't,
you know, I mean, I can see it happening for.
I could see why he thinks he's onto something, but it feels like somebody raised in a Western Christian nation or with like Christian influence, just some of the thoughts. And I don't think I say Christian because that's what I know.
Yes.
You know, so any Christians that think I'm knocking on them, that's just what most of us in this.
We all know Christian. We all know.
That's what most of us know in this part of the world.
Yes.
And we understand it. A lot of us were raised within that thought process, including me.
Yes.
So it's just, when we talk about these things, it's easier to kind of go along there. I'll shut up. I'm rambling.
The West, I will, and I'll kind of end that on this. The Western part of civilization tends to lean heavily into the science and stuff like that with this. And then it seems like a lot of Eastern belief systems, or if you go, you know, like shamanism and whatnot, like the people that have this ability, and it's called an ability. It's not called like a disability. You're not mentally ill. You're not anything like that. Like you are in this tribe, you're a healer, you're a seer, you're this and that. Like you have supernatural abilities because of these voices. Like you're piercing into the other side. And so it's a weird perspective shift when you come over to like places on like the Western side of things where it's like, oh no, we're all doctors of medicine and science over here. Over there, they're like, no, this person is special, more special than us, so much so that we've made them, you know, we've given them this role in the community that that is, you know, pretty, I don't know, if you think about it, us giving some random like schizophrenic, you know, the like, hey, you're the healer now. You like that?
I don't, just because I think people feel or can communicate wisdom that may come from the other side of whatever their culture is.
Adele.
That doesn't, like schizophrenia is something completely different. I think that is.
Can you at least see the perspective of it?
Oh yeah, because what they see is real. That's the problem, is they cannot distinguish what is really happening between what is part of their schizophrenia. So if you can't determine that reality, you don't know what's right or what's wrong.
Yeah.
Some of those voices that are saying to do bad things will slip through. You know, there's multiple reasons why people with schizophrenia just lose it sometimes.
And I should clarify here that I don't believe that every person with schizophrenia is demon possessed. Okay, I don't think that is the case. I think there's plenty of people that have it that's not to the extent of the wild stuff that I would assume would involve some form of demonic possession.
I am one that believes it.
0% of it is. Yeah. You didn't even have to say that, Christian. Everyone already knew. They know your role in this podcast. But with that being said, we are going to touch on some of the religious beliefs. Not even beliefs so much as just picking, scripture out of different religions that kind of touches on the idea of entities residing within your head. Creepy, I know. It sounds fantastic. And we're obviously going to start with the best religion, which is science. No, I'm just kidding. It's Christianity.
Oh, I was like the spaghetti monster in the sky.
That's one. So here's some scripture that, again, kind of correlates with what we're talking about here. In Ephesians 6:12, it says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." So this verse echoes kind of Swedenborg's and Van Dusen's framework of a spiritual realm influencing human experience, as well as Marzinsky's view of voices as parasitic entities. For example, earlier, Sarah's tormenting voice and Tom's manipulative, quote, "they," could be seen as manifestations of these spiritual forces of evil. It suggests a battle beyond the physical, aligning with the idea that schizophrenia might involve more than biology, a supernatural struggle in the mind. And then in James 4:7, you have, "Submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you." And this directly parallels Sherry Swiney's "That's a Lie" program, where she pretty much was just like, no, what you're saying is a lie. I don't have to listen to that. That's not true. And eventually things like, all right, well, she wins.
Could any of these biblical passages be related to that, what did you call it? The voice in your head. What do you call it? Intrusive thoughts from ancient times being misconstrued with, oh, they're demons.
You can say that, but I
just did.
I know you did, but what this is it's saying that in this world, we don't battle with flesh and blood. We actually battle with these principalities, with these demons, fallen angels, all that stuff in the unseen realm. And so what we think is, oh, that's just me being silly. That's my thought. It's a lot more complex than that.
It might be, but I don't think it's...
I know you're saying it could just be intrusive thoughts. If you go back to that time period, I think you'd get your answer pretty easily,
Yeah, these people didn't understand what a thought was.
That's a pretty bold take, pretty hot take you got there.
That's not a hot take. I
mean, that these people don't understand thought.
It sounds like it.
They don't understand thinking. Is that where we're going with this? You're saying that's not a hot take? That feels like the hottest of takes, man.
Why do they just assume it's a demon and not just a guy having a bad day?
I don't know. I think there's probably differentiators between the two, probably like, oh, Steve's having a bad day, as opposed to...
I don't expect you don't have to answer that, because we'd have to go back in time and ask these people,
yes,
what the hell were you thinking when you wrote this?
Sure. And
I was thinking my neighbor was acting kooky and told me about this dark entity sitting in his corner telling him to go check out the neighbor's wife.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that even during Jesus's time, he cast out entities, and like entities would, so much so they saw him coming, they're like, no, please send us in pigs, don't get rid of us, don't send us away, send us into this group of pigs right here. Entities, man, demons, demonic, like you can find the stuff in scripture, whether or not you believe Jesus or any of that stuff. I'm saying that like this time period, demons.
I do believe that Jesus was there. I don't believe supernatural stuff.
I know you don't understand, but I'm for the listeners at home, I'm saying that if you want some kind of reference for this, go follow Jesus. There you go. You're welcome.
I mean, I'll give you credit. Follow Jesus, you'll be better. But also, follow Jesus.
Okay.
Don't be one of these people. You know what I mean. You know what I mean.
It's insufferable. And this is coming from someone that is insufferable himself. I promise you, I am the worst example of someone following Jesus.
You got time?
Well, yeah, everyone says that until then you're face to face with God. You're like, dude, my bad. I should have been better.
I'll be like, dude, I covered for you, man.
No, like we're going to be up there. We're going to be up there at the same time. And like, what happened? Did the podcast studio blow up?
Here's the thing. I better be there before you.
That we can only hope.
Okay.
We can only hope. But see, part of me, I want to die before everyone else dies, because that sounds annoying to be like 90 and have no friends. Like I already have no friends as it is. What, I'm supposed to be 90 years old and just...
I have friends. I don't hang out with them much, but...
Yeah.
I have a grandson I like to hang out with.
That's true. But you think when he's 40, he's going to just be like, oh, hell yeah, grandpa, you know?
There'll be other little kids by then.
He's going to hate both of us within 10 years. You know, he's going to be like, you guys are lame. You guys talk about ghosts? Are you kidding me? 20 years we've been doing this podcast? Grow up. Like, dang, might have some points. It's fine. Anyway, another one is 2 Corinthians 10:4-5 says, the weapons we fight with are not the weapons of this world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ.
That's beautiful.
That is something that my mom would, like, and you know me, negative through and through,
oh,
right?
Really? I have never noticed.
My mom...
I can't even talk hockey with you.
Well, that's because the Kings suck, dude. There's no...
That sounds like sports.
There's no
it just sounds like sports.
I know.
Sometimes your team sucks.
But when I look at you and after 2 wins and then they give up that 1 loss and you're like, no, they still... I'm like, I don't know, man. I got a feeling they're going to give up 4. And then what happened? They gave up 4 losses in a row, lost the series, 4th year in a row. I'm done, you know? And that's fine. But what I'm saying is that growing up, whenever I'd say things or I'd like have these thoughts or whatever, my mom would always tell me, you take that thought captive. That is not your thought. That's not God. From God, that's negative. You don't need that. Every single time.
I think that's wonderful.
It is. If you do it, which I never did. I'm never like, this is not Christ's thought. Damn it.
Well, you know what? And to give you a little bit of leeway,
sure.
None of us do it at that age. Those are fundamental pillars that you might choose to build upon later on in life and help you out. So
my mom is an exception, has been this way my entire life. Like, I think she might be pretty much the best Christian that's ever walked this earth.
She seems pretty cool.
Yeah. And so, but that is one, like where you take, and that's kind of reminds me of that Sherry thing. Again, you take thoughts captive. You say, no, just because you came through my head doesn't mean that you're real, doesn't mean that you're from God, that you're from me. This is not me.
Okay. I'll support that a little bit, and I'll say why that is a good tactic, especially for Christians. Mm-hmm. Because most of the normal human shit, if you learn how to do that, is going to get cleared out. And then if there's still something there, then it might be demons.
Could be demons.
Because most of us can't tell if there are demons or not, because we're so, not just our brains, but the world around us is not conducive to living in mental peace at times. Mm-hmm. So for those of us that can do it, we need to practice that.
Sure.
You know, for this episode, schizophrenics.
Practice it.
Well,
I don't know how many schizophrenics listen to the show.
They can try it, but don't just... Yeah. It's hard to tell. I mean, it's such a fraught, terrifying experience for them and their families and loved ones.
Yes.
That sometimes... I mean, there's so much tragedy that comes out of this, I guess, mental issue.
Yeah.
You know, or psychological, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a doctor. I don't know all the proper words.
Yeah. And we do need to stress again that I don't know if there's any schizophrenics that listen to the show, but if they do, they need to know that you and I are not trying to hurt anyone in the way we're describing anything. Like sometimes we word things strangely, but we actually mean well. And we're really just covering something. Me in particular, I'm covering this topic because it's fascinating to me. And it's something that I thought randomly in my head. And then I looked into it. I'm like, oh, wow, other people have thought this as well. And I've actually researched it. So to me, it's a fun topic for me to get into. But even just saying the word fun feels like I'm kind of stepping on someone's toes.
Fun is the wrong word.
It is.
Fascinating,
but it can be fun too. Like, I'm just saying, I'm not trying to like hurt anyone's feelings. And if it comes across that way, you can honestly shoot me an email to thegang@thefreakydeaky.com, explain your thoughts, and I will apologize to you directly. Might take me 3 to 6 months, but I will. But yeah, so we're just covering stuff here. You know, it's not, we're not trying to get into anyone's head or tell you what to think or which way you should lean. I'm just giving you the information. It's really up to you to decide how you feel about it, you know? And being as someone that's not schizophrenic, I don't know what it's like to be in that situation. So again.
This guy, what's his name? Marzinsky?
Jerry Marzinsky. Yeah.
He reminds me of
Jerry Maguire.
No. This guy reminds me kind of the guy that was responsible for the book Michelle Remembers from back in the 80s.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say.
Cool.
If you remember the book and you remember the controversy, I understand what this guy is trying to do. I think there's probably a better way to do it.
If you say so.
I have not spent a ton of time dealing with people in a mental institution or any of that kind of crap. Don't listen to me.
Wow. So we have roughly 13 minutes left in this episode and about 6 hours worth of material to get back into.
Go ahead. You should have known, though.
I know. I knew going into this one it'd be a talker. I knew we'd be very chatty. That's fine. Anyway, I got one more, and that is Mark 5:8-9 says, "For Jesus had said to him, 'Come out of this man, you impure spirit.' And Jesus asked him, 'What is your name?' And he replied, 'My name is Legion, for we are many.'"
Oh, that's a good one.
That is a good one. And
so many scary movies.
I know, right? But that kind of like resonates that with the multiple spirits of Marzinsky's patients describing they, and that's something that a lot of schizophrenics say is the they.
Did I hear you wrong when you said you were going to
cover other religions?
Yeah.
I am. That was the last Christian one. So perspective. In Islam, jinn are unseen beings created from smokeless fire, something we still actually need to do an episode on, distinct from angels and humans with free will. Some are benevolent, but others are malevolent, known as shayatan, or devils, often led by Iblis, Satan. The Quran, Surah 114:4-6, warns of the whisperer who, quote, whispers into the hearts of mankind from among the jinn and men. Hadith describe jinn interfering with humans, sometimes causing distress or possession-like states, which traditional scholars link to mental disturbances. And Hinduism recognizes bhutas, or ghosts, and pretas, or restless spirits of the departed, which can afflict the living, especially if rituals are neglected. The Atharva Veda includes hymns to ward off such entities, suggesting they can disrupt mental peace. In yogic philosophy, the mind is vulnerable to external influences if not disciplined through meditation or mantra chanting. And then the Atharva Veda, Book 8, Hymn 6, verse 19, says, "The fiends who dwell within the heart, who haunt the dwelling where we live, all those who vex us with their voice, with spells we chase them far away." And even in indigenous traditions, we have many indigenous cultures like the Navajo who view illness, mental or physical, as potential spirit intrusion. In Navajo belief, malevolent spirits or ghosts can disrupt harmony, causing voices or distress. Healing involves ceremonies like the enemy way to expel them, restoring balance. And I didn't put the information about the enemy way, but I did actually read into that a little bit, and it's kind of crazy. So if that fascinates you, go look into that. Okay, so before we get into a couple of the stories, I wanted to say, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, ended up finding a pretty great TED Talk that was on this exact subject. Can't really dive into all that right now, as it's kind of a 30-minute video, but we'll post a link for that TED Talk in our Facebook group for anyone that may want to check that out as well. So if you're not a member of that Facebook group, be sure to head over to Facebook, give us a follow or whatever the hell you do on Facebook. I forget. And then join the Facebook group. It's a treat, especially if you like Creed references every 45 minutes of the day. Anyway, we have about 15 minutes, so I'm going to get through as many of these stories as I can. This first one's a little longer, but it's called I Heard the Voices Too. And it's by Frickafresh.
This can be as credible as all those other religious texts you were reading about, right?
I mean, it is in this person's own words, so it's very possible. Years ago, I was in a rehab for drug addiction. Oh, I should also mention several of these stories
have drug addiction?
Yes.
It's called self-medication.
Drug of choice seems to be meth for the most part. Well, that's fine. You do you.
That's the wrong choice.
Who am I to judge? I did 5 months in rehab, then 6 months of sober living after that. This occurred the last few weeks of being in rehab before going to sober living. I met hundreds of addicts. New people would come and go on a daily basis. A lot of these people were much worse off than others, and everyone was in for different things. A lot of these people that came in also had a plethora of mental illnesses, severe depression, PTSD, bipolar disorder, and many others. I'll never forget the day Mike, a 30 to 40-year-old male, was admitted. A lot of the techs that worked at that rehab informed all the patients about Mike and his condition. He had a case of severe schizophrenia and would constantly be talking to no one. He would get really agitated and upset at times at these voices and would often yell and have a panic attack. It was very sad, to be honest. It wasn't like this would happen sometimes. This was an ongoing 24/7 problem that Mike dealt with. Sounds like the absolute worst. The rehab was situated in an old motel-like complex, except it was much, much nicer, like a fancy hotel. Girls across the street in identical buildings. Aw, yeah. Everyone was assigned to a specific room with 2 to 3 other patients. When Mike showed up, he was placed in the unit I was in. I introduced myself to him and shook his hand. He seemed so timid and nervous, but I gave a rundown of how things work and a rough daily schedule for our program. I showed him his room and told him to not hesitate to ask me for anything. Before I walked away, I told him, Mike, we're all in here for our own reasons. I just want you to know that there's no judgment whatsoever on my end. and that no matter what you may be dealing with, you can come to me and confide in me for anything. And I want everyone to remember him saying that in a few moments here. Just remember that entire line he just told Mike. Anyway, he partially grinned and nodded at me. That was the last time we spoke for the 2 weeks he was there. That evening, I was watching TV in the living room of our unit when I heard him start aggressively talking, quote, to himself. The strange thing is that it literally sounded like he was having a legit conversation. I heard him say, "Don't say that, shut the fuck up." And then 5 seconds later, he said, "I'm not going to do that, leave me alone." And then a few seconds later, "Get the fuck out of here." This was expected because I was informed of his condition, but hearing him have an episode the first time made me feel really bad for him. Things took a very odd turn over the following days. A few days after Mike was placed in my unit, I woke up one morning to go make some coffee. I was in the kitchen, and Mike's room was down the hallway. I was pulling out a coffee filter when I heard clear as day, "What are you doing?" I turned around expecting to see Mike, but no one was there. Then I hear Mike all the way from his room scream, "Ah, get the fuck out of here!" I was very, very confused and didn't know what to make of it and kind of just shrugged it off. I was pretty alarmed by this, but things kept happening. It was later that week I was in the living room watching TV again when I heard Mike having another conversation with himself. But this time, I could distinctly hear a second voice. I thought to myself, does he have a split personality, and is he having a conversation between himself and his other self? The other voice was so much different, and I kept telling myself Mike's just really, really good at imitating other voices. I turned the volume down on the TV so I could hear more of this conversation. Mike says, "I told you no, I'm not going to do that. Leave me alone, please." The other voice responds, "Just go and do what I tell you, it's for the best." Mike responds, "No, that's bad, I won't do it." The other voice responds, "Go to the kitchen and get the knife now." Then Mike let out a big scream of despair. I sat there on that couch in utter disbelief. My brain could not comprehend what I was hearing or what was happening. I got a huge sense of dread that came over me. I got up and started making my way to his door to check on him. As I got closer, the conversation was becoming much more audible and clear to hear. There was 2 fucking people in that room, and nothing is ever going to change my mind. As I heard the other voice trying to persuade Mike again, I knocked on his door, and the voices stopped immediately. I opened the door to tell Mike I heard him scream and wanted to see if he was okay. It was just him sitting in a chair with his head in his hands like he had just gotten some really bad news. He looked up at me and said, "I'm fine, thanks. Just please shut the door." I immediately went to our head nurse and explained to her that Mike was saying some pretty scary things and that I was in fear of my life being in the same room as him. So much for no judgment and come confide in me. Am I right? Anyway, I mentioned to her hearing him talk to himself about a knife, and that was all it took for them to take Mike and relocate him to somewhere else where he could get help. To this day, I think about this experience I had with Mike and try to find reasonable explanations for what happened and what I heard. I've never heard voices or had hallucinations. I've been clean off drugs for years. This was just an experience I had that made me question reality. I feel like he didn't have schizophrenia but was possessed. I think about it often and still can't come to terms with it. I guess I want closure about it, and it's just something I'll never get. That's my story. Thanks for reading.
I thought he was in a rehab place.
He was.
Why does he say he had schizophrenia?
He could have been in rehab as well. You don't think people with schizophrenia... I just told you, half these stories are from meth heads, you know?
But there's a lot of hallucinations in that kind of drug.
Sure.
A lot of hearing voices. I don't know how many times... I mean, you grew up in the Antelope Valley.
Unfortunately.
I feel like you would have been around some of them.
I had someone come up to me with 5 different personalities and have a conversation with the other 4 of them, and not me, but keep me nearby.
Yeah, so that's not necessarily... To me, it's not news. It's not anything different than somebody who, in the throes of addiction, kind of losing their mind a little, which that type of drug will do, and I've seen it done a million times.
Sure.
And we've heard some of the worst stories you'll ever hear in crime are from those people.
What do you mean, those people?
People going through that kind of psychotic breakdown because of drugs.
Try to catch you in a racial moment, but it's fine. Way to ruin it.
I feel like the person telling the story is telling you what he experienced or felt, not necessarily what happened.
Yeah, he's also kind of a dick, no? Being like, hey, Mike, we're all in this together, man. I hope you're okay.
I would say that to a lot of people, but if I thought they were going to stab me, we're not in it together anymore. I don't care who you are.
It's not very Christ-like, Christian. No, I probably wouldn't do the same.
Yeah, I think...
what'd you say about that knife? No, someone come get this man.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you got to look out for the safety of others.
You really do be like that. Let's get into a couple more of these stories before we hit the old dusty trail. That's too bad. I got a lot of really short ones. I know I was supposed to touch on an article. So I'll read a couple more of these stories, and then we will there's something that somewhere in here, let me see if I'll briefly touch on an article and then kind of close it out with schizophrenics sharing what the voices tell them. I found this one subreddit that is about schizophrenia, and is the person being like, just asking people like, hey, what do your voices tell you? Spoiler alert, a lot of them are negative, but there are surprisingly a few super positive. But positive to the point where it's like annoying, where it's like, hey, dude, shut up. I'm trying to focus here. Okay. Daddy's trying to get some sleep. This next one is from Info Overload 70. Says, I have a diagnosed schizophrenic ex-brother-in-law and an undiagnosed schizophrenic nephew, both self-medicated with meth. My ex-brother-in-law often had disturbing conversations with invisibles, saying things like getting knives, attacking people in the home, etc. He was uncomfortable to be around when he wasn't on meds. Strange occurrences happened around him in my mother's home. Coffee cans would fly off of shelves. A clock flew off the wall to nearly hit him and was shattered by the force. My nephew also had conversations with invisible friends that told him to do bad things when he was 12. My mother's house turned out to be very haunted, and those two were often deeply affected. I do not doubt they are uncontrolled psychics and targets for lower entities when drugs or alcohol is used to block out the voices. Seeing things flying at them, and I am not schizophrenic, kind of convinces me that there is more than we can conceive with that so-called mental illness. This next one is from No Construction 6742, very brief. Says, there was a time I stayed with my grandmother and my schizophrenic uncle. He has had similar experiences to Mike from the first story his entire life. One night I heard a demonic voice whispering in my ear. Never have I done hard drugs or have history of mental disorders. From that point on, I knew he wasn't crazy. So that person's kind of insinuating that because there's a demon in the house whispering in my ear, that it must also be after my schizophrenic uncle. Can't really say I agree with that, but it's a possibility.
Sounds like a dumb reach.
Yeah.
In my words.
Those are your words. Oh, this one's from The Real Shady Shady. Says, I've been my older sister's caregiver for 10 years. She's schizophrenic, and at this point, I am convinced the voices she hears are sentient, malevolent beings. And so are a lot of mental health professionals that deal with schizophrenics often. A veteran psychiatrist, Jerry Marzinsky, with 40 years of firsthand experience with them, just wrote a book on it.
I like how they 40 years, that makes him the best.
It just means that you know what you're talking about. I mean, for me, I've been designing for over half my life now. So that means that I could probably take on someone that is, newer to it. Or
designing is different than
reading the mind.
Well, you can't read minds.
I think you run into patterns with anything though, right? You're like, you simplify your workload. You're like, I can do this.
Yeah, but if you run into a pattern when it comes to art, that is totally different than this is a pattern that shows me that this person needs to be doing this or take this medication. These are the patterns. Though?
Like if you're talking to people and they mention the same thing, that's a pattern. And you're like, oh, well, this has worked with the other people that had this pattern.
I mean, it's a pattern, but will you following through the pattern that you see work the same
Everyone
on
is
the
unique.
mind as opposed to in your art?
Everyone is unique. And also we've said pattern a lot in the last minute. So
which has developed its own pattern.
It's a pattern on its own now. Isn't that nice?
And now I'm hearing voices. Like that time Lucille Ball heard voices and it was just her dental work.
Just her Lucille Balls?
She heard a radio station coming through her teeth.
Hella dental work you got
there.
True
story.
Well, it's not a true story, but it's an episode of I Love Lucy probably, yeah?
No, it actually happened to her.
Oh, that actually happened to Lucille Ball. Wow,
yeah, or, growing up, you see that in cartoons and you're like, that's dumb. And then you find out it actually used to happen to people.
Yeah, that would be a little strange.
Still kind of dumb, but weird.
There's this one schizophrenic that kind of weighs in on it, but that's way too much writing. And to their credit, they kind of side with both. They say that both are possible, that science and the supernatural kind of combine on this one.
What if the voices and crap that they're hearing are actually outside of themselves, but they're picking them up in that unfiltered way, and it has a different meaning to them? Like maybe it's just the thoughts of other people that they're hearing going on around them, and not able to block it out. So you got to make up some kind of, like, I guess, a story in your subconscious or your brain to figure out what's really going on. And
I'll say maybe for a few of them, yeah. Some of them are direct to you, like hate on you, you should die, it's you. You know, like those ones I'm like, that's probably not something you're picking up on. But if it is, that's very strange.
If it's that direct, it's probably you.
It's probably a demon.
Also known as you.
You are a demon, it turns out. Wow. Very strange. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys, just to summarize this a bit since we're winding down here, a summary of an article from Waking Times. Anyway, the article from the Waking Times explores the shamanic perspective on mental illness, contrasting it with Western medical views. And this is kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier. According to the shamanic worldview, individuals diagnosed with mental disorders in a hospital setting are seen as potential healers undergoing a spiritual transformation. Malidoma Patrice Some, a West African shaman, suggests that what Western medicine labels as psychosis or schizophrenia might actually be a profound spiritual awakening or shamanic initiation.
So I should trust this guy?
This guy?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to, but I'm just giving you his opinion. And he argues that these individuals are overwhelmed by the presence of spiritual energies or entities that they are unable to integrate, a process that in shamanic cultures would be guided by a healer to help the person emerge as a shaman themselves. And this is kind of what that TED Talk was about, is this dude was a photographer and he was going around, and when he met all these healers and stuff like that, like they'd always have this kind of like protege with them. Like, this is also someone with schizophrenia. There's going to be a healer for our tribe. But they turn into like these, what's it called? Oh, trances. Like they'll go into trances and like answer questions and stuff like that. And like, it was a crazy, and you guys should honestly check it out because it was actually kind of cool. But
so it sounds like every religious leader or cult leader that speaks with the gods has schizophrenia.
Not necessarily.
Or certain shamanic cultures will promote somebody that's schizophrenic because they feel that they're talking to the other world when they're really just going through an episode.
It's like, well, kind of like what he mentioned, like you need to be guided in this. Like you can't just go, willy-nilly balls to the wall. Like, you have to be taught by someone who has gone through it themselves to show you how to control this, maybe fine tune it, so it's not just wild and out there. And the crazy thing is a lot of these people, like these people that were promoted to healers or whatever for the entire tribe, they weren't paid for this. So they still had like other things that they had to do, but they were also on top of that.
Were they considered schizophrenic because they heard voices?
I don't think they were considered schizophrenic. If they'd come over, they'd be schizophrenic.
Is that the label that kind of is being put on them because we are looking from the outside and saying they're kind of channeling these schizophrenic urges in a healthy way by teaching them how to control this supernatural presence in a way that helps them become shamans in the future, like the apprentice shamans? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I have no idea what you're trying to say.
Like the shaman's like, oh, he's schizophrenic. Let's make him a shaman.
Yeah, I don't know if that's how it works, but I'm not there to be honest with you.
Okay,
go watch the TED Talk. That guy describes.
Maybe that's just the meaning I took from it, and it's on me. I don't know.
It's on you, man. No, that's fine. Yeah, he argues that individuals are overwhelmed by the presence of spiritual energies or entities that they are unable to integrate, a process that in shamanic cultures would be guided by a healer to help the person emerge as a shaman themselves. The piece further discusses how Some observed a mental health patient in the U.S. and noted that the chaotic energies affecting the individual were similar to those he had seen in his village, where such a person would be nurtured into a healer's role rather than medicated or institutionalized. In Western contexts, he believes the lack of spiritual understanding and ritual support exacerbates the suffering of these individuals, turning a natural process of spiritual emergence into a prolonged crisis.
That's dumb.
You can say that, but there's actually a lot of people that this checks out and makes a lot of sense.
It's too simplistic of an explanation.
What I'm saying is that from schizophrenics, like there's schizophrenics themselves that say that this was not, I'm not going crazy, this was in fact a spiritual awakening.
It would feel like it.
But see, that's not for us to say.
And also, if you're going through it and you can come out the other side, it would be a spiritual awakening because everything would change. Everything would be better or controllable. So that would change everything about you. and probably completely alter the way you view the world around you, which in turn would be a spiritual awakening if you attach a little bit of a maybe meaning to it. Does that make sense? It's such a drastic change if you're able to come out on the other side of this, especially on your own, that it would be a spiritual awakening.
I'm trying to remember, I think, and this is probably in the TED Talk, but the dude was talking about someone that was literally going through the roughest time in his life because of this illness and ended up coming out of it because someone actually took him and was like, no, I've been through this. This is what you do. And it really, truly, to him, was a spiritual awakening. It was something where this wasn't, I'm not just mentally ill, or I'm not, a contributing member of society, or I have no redeemable qualities or anything now because my mind is so messed up. No, it was fixed. And because of this quote unquote illness, you actually have a connection to something deeper that normal people don't have, and that is the spiritual realm.
I disagree. You can
disagree because you don't agree with any of the spiritual stuff. But
if you had that, it's not inaccessible to other people. It's just maybe you put in the work.
And if can you access it? Like, do you have access to this?
I think anybody can access some of these places if they put in the work.
Then why not put in the work? This is the podcast for it. Christian, why not put in that work? See if you can access it,
Speaking to somebody like you, who gets a little bit less rest than me.
Maybe.
Theoretically.
Do I not look well rested?
I've talked to you before. I know you don't get that much rest. You have a toddler that is very active and energetic.
Yes.
It's hard to put in the work on a lot of things.
That is true.
Now, some of the people like this may have had no choice if they wanted to survive, to put in some kind of work. And then once they found something that worked for them, they could fix a lot. And we can argue all day whether it was with spiritual help or with certain training.
I don't think there's much of an argument for it to be anything other than spiritual, personally.
Plenty of people would argue with that. It's just a part of the process of
I'm not
living.
saying schizophrenia in general. I'm saying that going through something like this as a spiritual awakening, there's no other
I think you can have
avenue.
A spiritual awakening without believing in spirits, if that makes sense.
No. Then you're just having an awakening.
You don't have to believe in spirits if there's really spirits.
What?
You don't have to believe in something for it to exist.
Yeah, obviously.
I don't have to follow a bunch of man-made rules to believe in something.
You're saying, man, are you talking about like religions again?
I'm just saying.
I'm just talking about the spiritual realm in general. Like, I'm not even attaching any kind of belief system to it. I'm saying that a spiritual awakening is a spiritual experience. And it's something that when you have that, there's not a doubt in your mind it's anything other than that. Like, there's no way
I get that. I totally get what a spiritual awakening is.
Yeah.
I'm being kind of a jerk about it, but
hey, it's fine, man.
I get it, and
it's good radio.
I believe it's good for a lot of people.
Yes,
but also earlier when you were kind of describing this person's take on things,
this is someone from a shamanic village, I should say, came to America.
Some of the verbiage reminded me a lot of Scientology. Yeah, like this is this. We will fix this. We will guide you. Forget the Western world and their beliefs, because the Western world in some of these cases does work sometimes. And there are plenty of people in psychology, in the medical profession, that want to help people.
Yes.
Loved ones, family, friends, whatever. It's not.
There's also a great deal of greedy people.
There is. And that's just the sad fact of humans.
Yes.
So let these people do their work and figure out how to do it. But there's not necessarily a right or a wrong way yet, because we are not smart enough as humans to know how to fix this.
I don't know.
So if we're going to heavily medicate someone, sometimes it needs to happen to protect that person and their loved ones.
But there can't be a right or wrong way to do it, but we can just heavily medicate them.
Sometimes
as an option, that's
not
fine.
Not everybody, obviously. There's too much of it. But sometimes people need to go on different kinds of medications to save their life. And we shouldn't knock that because it works for them. It doesn't work for everybody. That's the problem. Until we get to a point where we're like, okay, here's this pill, fix all your mental issues. Then we don't know shit.
Yeah, but it shouldn't come down to a pill thing, especially in this case. Like,
if it's going to save your life, it should.
No.
But it shouldn't be especially.
It's not a cure-all. There's one pill.
Exactly. That is, sure, there's a bunch of pills we can take that help us. But when it comes to the mind,
Yeah.
It's
a terrible thing to waste.
That too. But it's just, we don't have the technology and the know-how to target these things in a way that works and that's always healthy. So it has to be a case-by-case basis, and the whole system needs to be changed in a way.
If you say so. All right. So I'm going to finish out with my man Some. And then we're going to say this, the shaman guy that you were just shit talking.
I was. I don't.
So anyway, just to reiterate, so in Western context, he believes the lack of spiritual understanding and ritual support exacerbates the suffering of these individuals, turning a natural process of spiritual emergence into a prolonged crisis. The article also contrasts this with a brief mention of a patient Some worked with who, after participating in a shamanic ritual, reportedly stabilized and reintegrated into society without further need for psychiatric intervention, highlighting a potential bridge between shamanic and modern approaches to mental health. And that's kind of what I was saying with the guy in the TED Talk, too, is that you can be in this, like, pretty much death spiral with something like this, go through some of these processes, and then come out as just a normal person. Like, you broke free from that. Like, the hold that it had on you is no more. And that's crazy to think about if it truly is just a mental disorder. You know, like that you can just be healed of a mental disorder.
You could just all of a sudden one day stop smoking.
I did.
Right.
I read a book, though, so that helped.
Right.
I wouldn't have done that without the book.
Right.
You know?
So maybe it's similar in this situation. They just found a way that it works, and maybe...
We're talking about a shaman right now, though.
A shaman
that you're just shit-talking, no less.
Here's why sometimes, a lot of times, shamans do work, and they work better than a regular health professional in our modern times.
Is this 30 seconds or less?
Yes, because a shaman works with his people, knows his people, and instinctually knows these people and just understands better. So he is able to communicate or to listen better than a regular medical profession in the United States of America.
Translation, he gives a shit about the people he's...
Exactly.
Okay. Anyway, so to close this out, because this is already mind-numbingly too long, this is a few takes from schizophrenics sharing what the voices tell them. This first one is from Smarmy Marmoset. So at first, it was just my name. Then it progressed to hearing hi and hello. Now I hear more aggressive things like them calling me vulgar names. Other times I hear someone crying, random music playing, shit like that. Sometimes it's just random nonsense and two people having a conversation with each other. Majority of the time it's random phrases. The other day I heard a male say, "What now?" Today I heard a female say, "Hello." There was a crazy one that actually felt reassuring. It said, "Those that walk the path of death do not want you to walk along it." Very random.
That's a good one.
That is, yeah. Thanks for that random voice in my head. Now, see, something like that kind of sounds like you could be picking up on radio waves or like random, like you were kind of mentioning earlier.
Like you're touching somebody else's consciousness or hearing
like
their
thought or random like conversation even.
Which...
Psychic at that point, no?
Is it psychic or telepathy?
Telekinesis.
No, telekinesis is moving
stuff. Well, you're moving their words into your brain.
Or maybe you're not. Maybe you're
just picking up on them.
I mean, the way it works is, in my opinion right now, is since thoughts are things, thoughts are not going to just be contained within our head if we have a consciousness.
Sure.
They're going to be with our consciousness. So if our consciousness is maybe more expanded, which I tend to believe, which would be why we can pick up on these kind of sayings that really seem like we're picking up on other people's thoughts.
Sure.
Except for the girl that said hello, and maybe she recognized this person can hear her. I don't quite remember where I was going. It just makes sense to me that we're going to pick up on some of that stuff. Now, depending on how we view the world and how comfortable we are in our own mind, sometimes that might be scary.
Sure.
I think a good example would be like a hand in the hallway that you just dealt with.
I moved the laundry basket.
Right. But just think of you're like, okay, that laundry basket created a hand in the hallway and it was real to somebody.
And it was waving at him.
Yeah.
And it could have been real for all I know and just disappeared when I moved the laundry basket.
Yep. Who knows? And there's so many variables with this kind of stuff that's why I was knocking psychologists earlier. Yeah. There's so many variables with how our mind works. It's really hard to put it into a simple box.
Yeah, it really do be like that. This one, interesting Kiwi, 5004. Mine tell me that they are out there to kill me and say mean things about me and my family. And I hear babies crying. Sounds annoying. This next one. Oh, this is actually a little snippet. A pastor that visits these like psych wards specifically for this reason. And it says, we had a family friend who was a pastor who had something called the gift of discernment. He would visit psych wards because he could tell the difference between those who are actually psychologically afflicted and demonically afflicted. Most were indeed psychologically, but some were demonically afflicted, either being stalked by or possessed by a demon or demons.
Said the preacher.
Said the person that knew the preacher.
Same thing.
So this is a pastor that goes to psych wards and
finds demons.
Pretty much, from the sounds of it. And I know you're probably laughing at that, but the very fact that he doesn't go to every single person and be like, demon, 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 and that there's, and he, like this guy said, most people are, it's a psychological thing. But there are some demons that hide in the shadows.
There are also people that if you tell them, I'm taking care of your demon, they won't be affected anymore, whether there was a demon or not.
I'm not even trying to convince you of any of this. I'm doing this mainly for our listeners.
I'm not even trying to convince you. I'm just saying there's some people.
Yes, I know that if you tell them there's a demon, they'll be like, I believe it, there's a demon.
And then you say, I exorcise that demon, they're perfectly fine afterwards.
Yeah, but you make it seem like every single person walking this earth is those people and that no demons could possibly exist because we're all just so easily manipulated by anyone saying anything that... Like, I mean, and that's just...
There's plenty of us in the world that don't think the demons exist.
Actually, the majority of people do think demons exist. So you're actually in the minority.
I said plenty. I didn't say the majority.
Plenty.
I said there's a good amount of people that are like...
Oh, you're changing it now.
I said plenty. You can go back and listen to the tape. As a matter of fact, you just did.
I did. Yeah, you said plenty, and then you said now there's a decent amount of people. Now next it's going to be there's a handful of folks, and then after that there's a few people. You know, so it's
said plenty. You can interpret that number any way you want to.
You said it, and then you followed up by saying there's a decent amount of people. So plenty
to me,
or
decent amount and plenty are the same thing. I'm not arguing whether it's a majority. I said there's a lot of people that don't believe in demons.
Yeah, and it's okay to be wrong.
No demon ever attacks them.
Well, actually, there's no way for you to say that. Demons attack people in different ways.
That's what I hear.
I want you to understand. It's not just about.
Oh, I get that.
You know,
I've heard all the stories of how demons attack perfectly innocent people.
I'm not sure you have. You need to hear the better stories, Christian. You don't hear the good stories.
You act like I didn't grow up in a church.
I know, but see, that's part of the problem is you grew up with Catholicism, right?
No.
You grew up in the Christian church?
They're all Christians.
Oh, my God. No, but there's, okay. We're already way too far into this episode to get into this shit, but.
It wasn't Catholicism.
I thought, for whatever reason, maybe I'm thinking of my dad. Classic.
It was freaking altar boy. That's probably why you thought that.
Yeah, isn't that Catholicism?
It's also a certain thing that is not Catholicism, but is closely related.
What is it?
Episcopalian.
Episcopal. I didn't know that they had altar boys, but I guess
they're basically the Church of England. And if you know the history of the Church of England was formed when Henry VIII could not get a Catholic divorce.
Classic.
So he's like, now I'm the head of this church, the Church of England.
I win.
So the Episcopalians kind of are like part of that or offshoot of that.
Well, it sounds great.
It sounds like
I understand why you left, Christian.
It was a great church. The people there were cool. The ambiance.
The ambiance, of course.
The incense. Father Olson was just like, Father Olson was one of my heroes in this world. Another episode, we'll go back and talk about him some more. I'm sure I've talked about him, but he was a cool guy.
That's what they say. All right, this last one is from Judy Hops at your service.
I don't believe her.
Says, the voices basically tell me to kill myself and to kill others. Also, the other day I passed out and I also had a psychotic attack and the paramedics had to check my blood and the voices then told me that they were going to put poison in me. So naturally I flipped the fuck out. Not once have these voices ever had anything nice to say. Wow. Sounds like a demon you got there.
Sounds like you, your voices need to listen to Thumper's mom.
Oh, God. So that's all I got. This episode is way too long. Guys, give your thoughts on all this.
How did you not know this episode was going to go long? You knew I had reservations about it.
No, I knew you had reservations about it, but I didn't think that, what was it? We got stuck talking, and it was like a good conversation. It flowed really well, but it was longer than I anticipated it to be before we got into the religious bits of it. But I liked it. I don't know. And usually this is the way episodes work when you're a podcaster, and Christian can attest to this, is you will pour your life, your heart and soul into an episode, and you'll just be nervous as hell until you record it and being like, did I do this right? Did I flesh this out properly? Is this going to make sense to people when they hear it? And you're really going to love it. And then it's not going to perform well at all. And then you're going to throw some random junk together in 30 minutes or less, send it out in the airwaves, and people are going to be like, that's the best episode I've ever heard in my life. I love every second of it. So it's really hard to tell. And I thought for 250, like, you know what? We've been doing this for a while. Let's
go crazy.
Let's go crazy with 250.
For those of you that are crazy, I apologize.
Wow. Speaking to all of my exes.
Mine too.
And that's fine.
No, I'm just joking.
No, look at that. I know you're like best friends with all your exes. You're weird.
I am.
But it's fine. Mine just
not best friends, just friendly.
Friendly. And that's the way, that's a good word to describe a Christian, friendly. But you guys let us know your thoughts. I'm not here to convince anyone anything. I just wanted to offer a perspective that isn't what you're going to find anywhere else for the most part.
Except for that Marzinsky guy.
Yeah, and check
that
out
religious
those
guy
books.
from back in the day.
That guy wasn't religious.
And the TED Talks guy.
The TED Talk guy was pretty great.
That guy from the 1700s?
I don't think he was religious. No. It was a spiritual, but he wasn't like associated with any specific religion. It was more like, hey, there's something out there that isn't what we see, and I want to talk. I'm tapping into that.
And if I say it like this, the church won't kill me.
Sure. Yeah.
Which was a actual reality during that time.
You're adding a lot of random stuff that doesn't fit.
Going back to that time, there were certain things.
There's certain things that you could get killed for, yes.
Yeah, because we did the John D episode.
We have done a John D episode.
And I can't believe they
Christian,
didn't kill him.
I want this episode to end. My anxiety is so high right now thinking about editing this. I just want people to give us your thoughts. That's it. And not necessarily on, is it demonic, or I'm asking, is it possible that sometimes demons interfere with this stuff? This is like low-hanging fruit for a demon, if you ask me.
And you don't have to say what I want to hear just to make me agree with you. If you believe it's demons, tell us.
It's fine. Most people do agree with you, Christian, especially on this type of stuff.
I don't think most people. I just think...
No, the people that agree with me will email me and say, Scott, I totally agreed with you on this. Great work. That is where it ends. Okay. The people that agree with you will comment on everything we've ever posted and say, Christian was right about this, Scott, you fucking moron. And then I'm like, okay, well, at least the 4 people that agreed with me emailed me instead of putting their own name on the line and commenting on the socials. You know, holding up your boy for a change. It's fine.
It's just the demons attacking you.
Speaking of the demons, and that is actually what happens. I've been going back and forth emailing one of our listeners that kind of reiterated something that I personally believe, but it's fine. We're not going to...
Do you need me to send my protection around you?
No, whatever weird shaman bullshit you're working with, I'm all right.
Come on, do you think I would work?
Mine is Christ. Is yours Christ?
Do you think I would work? Like, you hear how I talk and think. Do you think I'm like, oh, this one's okay?
What, are you going to send beakers and like a periodic table or something like that? Like, what is...
Sending beaker would be awesome. You could blow them up and feel better.
That would make me feel
like
better.
Dr. Bunsen.
Anyway.
Yeah, I loved Beaker back in the day. Dr. Bunsen. I just wanted to see how Beaker's face would be rearranged after he blew up or caught on fire. Was that wrong of me as a child? Violent world I grew up in. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, I guess we are too, guys. That's not really how I wanted to end the episode, but I so want this to be over that's how we're ending it. So goodbye.
Bigfoot is stuck in by your window. Dogman is scratching at your door. Ghosties are walking up and down your halls at night, and the Hat Man is coming back for more. Your name is Christian. You love a can of beans, and you're the wettest blanket skeptic this world has ever seen. You're almost always wrong. It's quite an impressive streaky. This song has rambled on too long. Welcome to the Freaky Deaky. Bigfoot is stalking by your window. Dogman is scratching at your door. Ghosties are walking up and down your halls at night, and the Hat Man is coming back for more. Your name is Christian, you love a can of beans, and you're the wettest blanket skeptic this world has ever seen. You're almost always wrong. It's quite an impressive streaky. This song has rambled on too long. Welcome to the Freaky Deaky.
This one has a slight, very slight introduction before.
What are we doing this one on?
Schizophrenia. So I'm going to have to give the biggest trigger warning of all time after we get past that intro.
Oh, don't worry.
Music.
I'm going to be giving a trigger warning too. I don't know how comfortable I am with this topic, but I'm going to give you a break.
Fine. Yeah. All I ask is that you go in with an open mind, Christian. And for people that don't have an open mind, all I'm going to ask is that they don't go in at all. You know? Sit this one
I
out,
would use
champ.
your words a little differently than that.
No, I'll figure it's going to flow well. It's going to be off the dome as usual, and I promise it's going to be
Don't use that
perfection.
for people that don't have an open mind. For people that might find this offensive,
No,
you don't have to enter
it's
this
the
one.
same. It's the same thing, though, right?
It is not the same.
It's the
thing.
same exact thing.
It
You
is
don't have
not
an open mind.
It's not the same.
You're
not even
just
close to this.
Robot thoughts. It's fine. You can have robot thoughts, but just don't come in. All right? Just stay on the outside.
No, the first way you want to say it is like a dude bro.
Hey,
alpha
spoiler
guy.
alert, I'm a dude bro alpha guy. All right. I thought that was pretty much,
Is that what you want to be?
I'm actually not. I'm the furthest thing from that. But,
Okay,
but I
then-
have to be that.
No, you don't.
That's good radio, Christian. It's fine.
No.
Can I get into the intro? I just want to get into the intro so I can be on the inside, and then I can tell people to hit the bricks. It's fine.